where we could go back to the developed world and say, okay, we have one issue and it's global tax policy. You have to strengthen the process in the UN right now about this. And that then enabled us to be able to go in there with significant leverage around the language around global tax policy. And very quickly I will say that what they had in the draft was frankly very weak, because they were just taking a UN process which was meant to be a set of experts appointed by the UN Secretary General, and instead of that group having one meeting a year, it was going to go to 2 meetings a year. And instead of that being supported by 1 or 2 full-time people, it was going to go to 2, 3 or 4 full-time people. So it didn't have any teeth to it. We really wanted it to be an intergovernmental body. And that's what we then put into the language that we proposed to them. And thankfully, because it was the one issue, we were able to get their agreement on this, and that's in the outcome document for Addis, and you can read it now. So that's actually what happened to Addis. It came down to the last moment. Finally, we agreed on the language and we got it forward. Now, for me, who is not very knowledgeable about the UN process, it still seemed that we didn't really do very much. It was, somewhat of a step forward, but nothing significant. But colleagues who know the UN process well tell me that it was in fact a very significant step forward, because we started to use some language around intergovernmental body, and the appointments had to come from the government, not from the UN Secretary General, and so on. So it actually has ended up being a fairly substantive step forward. India played a profoundly important role in this. A profoundly important role. Because the manner in which we are pursuing our development, in a democratic way, focused on the aspirations of the people, focused on a consensus building approach, an approach where we are taking into account various aspirations of all of our communities, all of our groups, gives us a credibility on the global stage, gives us an opportunity to have our voice be heard in a way that is unparalleled in the G77. That is why it's so important domestically for us to continue to pursue our development in a way that is truly inclusive, truly equitable. And if we do that, we have an opportunity to really take that voice, that approach forward into some of these global negotiations, and ensure, friends, that these global negotiations, which can be very inequitable sometimes, become more equitable and more inclusive. That is a very important role that we have to play right now. And it also means a great responsibility on us, that in our own development processes, that we are true to those aspects as well. I'll come to my third point, which I'll finish quickly. How do we move forward from here? As you see, in terms of the global capital flows, the official overseas development assistance and so on is a drop in the bucket relative to these other capital flows, whether it's trade, investment, or whether it is making sure we can capture the tax revenues that are leaving the developing world. And what that really means is that, as I think Mr. Chatterjee was also saying, that what we do domestically in terms of our ease of doing business, making it possible for India and the rest of the developing world to be an attractive place to attract investment, to be able to create a level playing field for domestic as well as global businesses, make businesses partners in progress, and enable our businesses to think about what they're doing not simply as a profit-making activity, but genuinely as a developmental activity as well. That, in fact, is probably the most durable, sustainable path forward if we have to finance development. Government is limited. Certainly when you look at the developed world and you see the fiscal challenges they face, we know that we're going to get very little in terms of development assistance, nor should we. Because we do have the ability to mobilize domestic resources, improve our tax to GDP ratios, ensure that India is attractive as a place to do business, because there's plenty of capital if indeed we can deploy it and attract it and bring it to India. And as the world faces more turbulence and a far slower sort of demand environment that has been expected, India has a chance to shine. India has an opportunity to really be a very attractive investment destination and be able to attract these funds both from domestic investors and global investors to really finance our development. And what will be true for India? What will be true for India in this fashion will be true for Ethiopia, it will be true for Nigeria, it will be true for Kenya, it will be true for Bolivia. Because the lessons we are learning, the way in which we are approaching it, I think has great relevance for other members of the developing world. Thank you very, very much, and I'll be happy to take it.
So, Minister, thank you very much for your remarks. I think what you said about the role that India played at Addis, and also the role that India can play going forward, because it has been our experience, and I think Sujata will bear me out, that India is a country over a large number of years now, is the country from which a lot of other countries, developing countries, take the cue. We may not realize the kind of influence that we have, but I think a lot of countries look to India to really take the lead on many of the issues that we are facing. So if India is a success, as you said, and is able to project a model which really provides answers to some of the developmental challenges which we are facing, I think it will be a contribution not only to India but to the rest of the developing world. Minister has very kindly agreed to take some questions. So please raise your hand. Question should be brief. Please also identify yourself, and please one question to one person. Please do not have a series in your intervention. Please, yes, please.
This is Vidya Venkat from The Hindu. My question, I actually had 3 questions, but since you said one, I'm asking only one. Well, after the 14th Finance Commission was set up and its decision to give more money to the states is concerned, like what Mr. Nisha pointed out about the lack of a framework on how states are going to spend the money for development, and there have been constant concerns from the social sector that their share of money to spend on social sector schemes and stuff have gone down. There are all these concerns are there, and it's not yet very clear. So on one end, while we talk about the challenge of raising the resources, there is also the concern that how will the existing resources be spent? Because if we look at the budget documents also, a lot of the time money is there, but the spending is not very efficient on many of the development related. So if you could answer that.
I think the best judge on whether spending is effective are the people of India themselves. We have a system where accountability is delivered through the voting booth, and the people of India, when they vote in the assembly elections, can decide for themselves whether a government is delivering development or not. And as I say, in Hindi, कि आज के समय जो भारत की जनता है वो विकास की राजनीति पसंद कर रही है, विनाश की राजनीति नहीं. So people are voting now for development. They are voting for governments that can perform and that can deliver tangible improvements in their daily lives. And that is the best way of enforcing that whatever funds are coming to the government are being spent the right way. Now, in addition to that, apart from the accountability that comes through our democratic framework, we also in Niti Aayog, of course, are setting up ways in which the states can work together to coordinate, and the center can assist them in the usage of the funds that are coming through the devolution for all of these social sector programs. So we are working in the spirit of cooperative federalism, as Ambassador Saran said. We are working through that spirit to be able to further empower and make the states capable to deliver public services to their people.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
नमस्कार, प्रदीप मेहता. ये आपने जो कहा विनाश की राजनीति में उसे कहूँगा विरोध की राजनीति. बहरहाल the question which I want to ask is part of my ignorance. Was the issue of Tobin tax discussed in this context of the discussion with Addis? Or would it, if not, then would it form a part of the intergovernmental working group? Thank you.
To my knowledge, it was not discussed.
I think it should be.
Yes, please.
Really thank you all for a very excellent presentation and various views. My name is Annie Namala. I work with the Civil Society for Center for Social Equity and Inclusion. I think the Minister really has taken a great step forward in looking at the global taxation. One thing I'd just like to refer to what Nisha was saying about the increasing inequalities. I think it would be something that we really look forward on how the increasing inequalities within the country, because I think SDG has within and across the country. So how are we sort of, some steps if you could really highlight on how we could tackle the increasing inequalities within the country, that would be something of great value, sir.
Okay, so that's a comment. Any question? Yes. Yes, please. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman.
Just a minute, he's asked for something.
Paul Hirwakar, Vadanam Surabia. Congratulations, Minister, because you have really taken the issue of tax and others. There is one aspect, I think, which is a gap. That is, well, the global South, in terms of the inequalities within the global South, how they are being addressed, because the inequalities within the countries, I think, is being addressed. But is there a framework that needs to be there in order for the for the sustainable development goals to be achieved? A large chunk of inequalities within the countries are not being addressed. And that framework, how do you see that we can strengthen? I mean, that's an anxiety that many of us have.
Well, I think the global multilateral set of arrangements that we have through various bodies such as the UN and the South cooperation that exists is intended to be bottoms up, which is that we can provide templates and we can provide frameworks and we can provide some principles by which people can be more effective in terms of meeting their sustainable development goals or addressing inequities in their societies. But ultimately, the global multilateral order now is for the sovereign states themselves to take the initiative and to take action on these kinds of issues. I think what you're asking for is some kind of top-down intervention, which is not appropriate and not even justified, I would say, given the world we live in.
Okay, last question.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned about the human development. I am H. Kumar from CST Energy Media. Question is access to energy to humankind. Technology leads to the humankind development. So my suggestion is sustainable development for all is scheme is there 10 years, 1 year passes. Why not to implement in India? Sustainable for all. Accessibility, accountability, acceptability and affordability.
Okay.
So to lead to the social development of India as an economic growth of.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last question.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Minister. And I'm Pooja. I'm with Oxfam India. I just wanted to ask maybe Ms. Mehta or the Minister if there's any thinking on, or if there's already some kind of agreement on involving the civil society in discussing or agreeing on the indicators that the country would arrive at.
So far, what we followed has been as was said at the start of this session, a series of consultations that have been undertaken, and I think those consultations will continue. At this stage, the discipline of the indicators, of the measurability of the indicators is something that is still to be decided within the UN. So we're a step ahead of that. So we'll come to that in due course. At this stage, we're still at figuring out even how these indicators are going to be measured, and that is something which is being determined by a group of experts at the UN.
Okay, thank you very much, Sujata, and thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for your patience, for answering all the questions that have been raised. Now, I will request Mr. Amitabh Behr to make a short vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador sir. Vote of thanks ordinarily are extremely short, so I'm going to make it very, very brief. But just in terms of my take home, I think this has been a fantastic meeting, but I would really be keen to see how we move ahead with 3 ideas. One is popularization of SDGs, accountability of SDGs, and what would be the monitoring tools for SDGs. So maybe we could do more conversations around this. I just want to thank the Minister for sharing his thoughts here, but also so ably leading us at Addis Ababa. A special thanks to Ambassador Saran for chairing this conversation. Sujata ji, a very, very special thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. I must also specifically thank Bhaskar ji and Nisha for sharing your thoughts and also bringing in 2 different perspectives from the corporate, particularly the CSI perspective and the civil society perspective. Yuri, the UN has been an extremely important partner of FIDC, so thank you for coming and thank you for walking along with us. I must end by thanking Sachin. This has been a fantastic, I think the whole idea of FIDC, I still would say, and Sujata ji, this is really a remarkable idea of bringing civil society, academics, and MEA together. So as FIDC, I think we are making much inroads, and I'm sure we can do many more conversations around accountability monitoring of this. Thank you, and thank you to all of you for coming. Thanks.